Some people write books to build a brand, others write to make a sense of their own lives, of their own life story. And for many, it's something that they still delay or carry with themselves, saying that one day I'll write my own book. Today, we're exploring why that urge exists, what it gives us psychologically and emotionally, and how writing itself can be deeply connected to well being. Welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where we explore the everyday choices that shape our mental and emotional well being. My name is Sayan, as some of you would know, and today I'm joined by Tim Lindsay, founder of Telwell Publishing and the author of Call to Authorship. He has helped thousands of people turn ideas, lived experience, and the hard earned insights into books that actually reach readers. So, today I invite you all to join me on this conversation where we'll be talking about why people feel called to write books in the first place and how that process often becomes a source of purpose, healing, clarity, and you just radiate that beacon to the rest. So, Tim, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show today, and I'm excited to see where this conversation heads to.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to share some of our experience working with a wide range of authors and the 10 years we have doing that. And it's been an incredible journey, and I've learned a lot through working with thousands of authors. And most recently, through writing my own book, have grappled with the challenge of writing a book and also grappled with the meaning of it. And, why people write is certainly an area I'd love to explore further. So happy to take questions in any direction we go, Sayan. So
Yeah, yeah. So you just mentioned that you have worked with so many authors. So I'm curious as to after working with so many authors, right, from such different, diverse backgrounds, what would you say is the most common reason, emotionally, that so many people come to you wanting to write a book? So what's
well,
that secret sauce?
the one reason, and when we work with authors, we actually do surveys with them and we ask them, why did you write your book? Why did you self-publish? Because we're involved on the self-publishing side. What motivated you? What are your goals? Who's your audience? So we actually do a lot of detailed surveys. And over the years, that's resulted in literally thousands of in-depth surveys that get into the hearts and the minds of people across society. So now you're asking me to boil it down to one reason. And if I had to do that, I actually have 3 sets of what I call why publish archetypes. But I'd say one piece is they feel like they have something to share that will help others. So I call that the service why, or in a word, to give. And then there's the 2 others are the strategic why, which is using a book to build something. And often when people build something like a business,
Yeah.
that's not just all selfishness. Often a business itself is about another level of service. And the third one has to do more with a journey. I call it the journey why, or it's becoming. So if the 3 words are give, build, become, the service why, the strategic why, and the journey why. And it's that journey why where you sometimes have people who start not knowing why they're writing, but they're trying to get something out. Maybe they've gone through a difficult experience or a traumatic experience and they're trying to make sense of that.
Hmm.
Or they're at a later stage in their life and they're trying to make sense of their life. But sometimes what begins as this exploration, which is trying to understand themselves, trying to understand the meaning of their life, sometimes that becomes through that process, they mature in a sense, or they heal. And at a certain point, they realize, wait a second, I actually have a service why as well. I have something to give in my story. And while, of course, there can be some catharsis, there can be some healing, not every intimate detail needs to be shared publicly or published, but there may be some ultimate learnings in your story
Hmm.
that you realize, wait, this is something that could really help somebody else. I wish, from my scars, other people can learn from my scars. I wish I had someone to guide me, and maybe I can use this book to help others going through a similar difficulty. And then sometimes that transition from the journey to this service component, sometimes people take it a step further and say, well, you know what? I'm not just going to put a book up there on Amazon. I need to share my story in other ways. And they may transition into becoming a speaker
Mm.
or doing media or maybe even doing some form of coaching. So someone can start on this journey of healing, end up offering a service through the book, and then leverage the book into, call it a business or something that is a service to people through a coach or a community and so on. So if I had to boil it down, it starts with having something to give to someone else, but sometimes it's almost it's not conscious all the time. And sometimes it's the process of writing the book is a process of learning, of discovering, of exploration. And that's not always the case. Some people might be motivated to use a book as a marketing tool. Other people, it's the journey of writing, and they find it, let's just say, a better use of their time than many of the horrible alternatives that we all succumb to. Getting angry on social media, scrolling through the online world, and if nothing else, it can be a more thoughtful, introspective, creative process to be working on a book. If no other reason than to be not doing worse things. But then that raises the question, well, should you publish it? And if you, do, and then people get confused. Who's going to publish it? Is my book good enough? Am I good enough? Or is this worth sharing? What is self-publishing? Should I should I invest in my book? Is that a foolish thing to do because it's so competitive? And happy to answer questions. Those are all questions that are very normal for people when they go down this path.
Yeah, I think you broke it down perfectly. And yeah, it's indeed, I would say, a safe space, when it comes to writing. And so naturally, I'll go towards that direction. But I think, yeah, more or less, it's either about, meaning or, building something, like you said, or closure. So it's either of those three, right? But Tim, I believe you'd be the perfect person to answer this. Why do you think, the best stories or, the best, I mean, uh, I would say it's the way you pen your thoughts down, right? Why do you think, I mean, writing often emerges after difficult life experiences? So what's your take on that?
Hmm. Well, I think it is partly that we draw meaning from challenge and adversity.
Yeah, you hit the nails on the very first.
Wouldn't it be great if we could just be happy all the time and start happy, end happy? But as a story, if you were going to go to a movie or a book, you'd probably put the book down right away and not watch the movie because you'd say, well, this is boring. And yet we think, well, why can't our life be that way? Even though, and I don't know, but I think it is through adversity and through difficulty and through pain that we find meaning, and that's just the reality, is that life is difficult in many ways. So that often leads people to writing and to sharing. I can give an example. One of our authors, and no matter how privileged you are, there's going to be difficulties in life. But one of our authors was born in South Sudan, and he lived in a very rural area. So it's a traditional living, very rural, very poor, and he was about 10 years old. And up until then, he had, learned about farming. And it's quite a portrait when he looks back at that part of his life. But then there's some meetings in the village. Some people had come to town. And of course, there's a war going on in Sudan that had been ongoing. And people came to town, there was meetings, and then his parents basically had a choice to make. And this choice was they had to hand over one of their sons to become it was supposed to be for education, but it was actually to become a child soldier in this war. And so he gets on a train with all these other kids from different tribes, and they're riding the train along, and then, living in these horrible conditions with almost no shelter. When it rains, they get wet. They use a little burlap sack as a blanket, and he got some sort of foot disease, and horrible. And this went on for years and years in this war that was going on. And after how many years was it? I think it was about 6 years of that. He escapes to, I believe, neighboring Kenya, and there was a refugee camp where there was tens or hundreds of thousands. I think it was like hundreds of thousands of people in this refugee camp. But he had a bit of hope. He's like, I may finally be through this. But 1 year at the refugee camp turns to 2 years, turns to 3 years, and I believe it was 4 years he was there. His hope was one day to maybe have a cell phone and to have a roof over his head so that he would not get rained on. Finally, after 4 years, he finds himself on an airplane, and he's flying to Australia. And he wakes up in Australia the first day, and he actually had tears, and he was crying, and he was wondering, because he had somehow been picked and was chosen as a refugee to, get out of the horrible conditions he was in. So he lands in Australia, and that was after about 10 years. I mean, he was 10 years old when he was taken away from his family, from his parents, lands in Australia. And he's wondering, like, why do these people who don't even know me are somehow helping me? But then there's a whole other journey, which is going from the world that he had lived in to integrating into this society, which was strange in some ways. In his village, they had their elders in the village. They as they got older, families took care of them. Meanwhile, one of the first jobs he got was caring for the elderly in these sort of large institutions. And he's sort of thinking, well, why do people send their elders to a hospital? And another anecdote I remember, he's working at a restaurant or something, and there's a little kid, and he starts interacting with the kid, but then the kid has to like turn away and not talk to him. And he had never heard of stranger danger, and the culture, you don't talk to strangers, and for him that was a new thing. So anyway, so Philip had this really traumatic life, but he went on, he integrated, he was part of a refugee integration society, and then he ended up volunteering for that group. He ended up getting a career in the mining industry and having a family. He ends up actually going back and having a traditional marriage, which in that culture was a lot of negotiations among different family members and trading of assets, but he actually reconnected. And of course, 10 years had gone by. Where is his mother, who he had left? And he actually journeys back to reconnect. And there's a moment in the book where he gives his mom a hug after that 10 plus years, plus several years, to be able to come back to his country. So for Philip, as an example, that's his story. And he started writing it, maybe confused, hurting, what the heck has gone on in his life, a cathartic element, trying to make sense of it. But, as he's writing and writing and writing, and then he got help from editors, and he starts to realize there's all these different themes, though, themes of resilience, themes of being a refugee, integrating into a new society. So his book, while it started as an expressive, cathartic exercise, it went on to become this story that it's not just his story, right? Many other people at that one refugee camp. There's 800,000 people, I believe. So, and then he's gone on to, if you see pictures of him, he's got a suit and a tie in front of a large room of tables with people well dressed, and he's doing public speaking, and he's talking about his story, which is a very powerful story. But then you're always looking for, what are those universal themes? What are the story is what makes it entertaining in a certain sense. It's what makes it memorable. It's what gives him his special place. But then what are the larger themes that it's a part of? And that becomes part of the book. And then that book transitioned to being a speaker and so on. So there's just one little example. Another example I could give is actually one of our consultants. She got approached to do a writing workshop for parolees, people who had been in prison, some of them in maximum security prison. And she's doing a writing workshop for them to explore their emotions. And she's 5'2", and she wonders, should I take this invitation? And she thinks about it, and she really believes in, the power of writing. And so she took a deep breath and said, yes, I'll do it. And she's done many sessions, and she'll go in. There's this group of big burly men with tattoos, and the air is full of angst, and she walks in there and she does what's called proprioceptive writing, a technique where you listen to Baroque music and you keep answering this question, what do I mean by that? And you start with one word, an emotion usually, and she chose fear in one case. And then they just write, and they write, and anytime they get stuck, they ask the question, well, what do I mean by that? And then they keep writing. It's sort of free flowing writing. And she uses the term wounded healer. I think it's actually a Jungian psychology term, but in a sense, to be a counselor or to be a helper, you almost have to have been wounded yourself to really be able to share and to teach. And then there's another stream of psychologists who actually research people who'd gone through traumatic experience and had their amygdalas on overdrive. So they have PST, post-traumatic stress. And they did these studies where they have them write expressively, where they think about their traumatic experience. What happened? What did they feel then? What do they feel now? And a few questions like that just get them reflecting on what had happened, and then how they felt, how they feel now, how it fits within their life story. They do 20-minute sessions a day for 4 days straight, and then they actually measured their immune system. For months later, they actually had a stronger immune system. And so this process of writing and catharsis is actually quite real, because you go from some of your pain being deep in your emotional brain, your amygdala, your limbic system, and stuck there, and it starts to get integrated into your more conscious brain, the part of your brain that tells your story and starts to put things in perspective. So it's not like your trauma is with you all the time. It's like, no, it's there, but it's part of your story. It's not
Also, yeah.
mining.
Wow, Tim, you are a great storyteller. All right. I mean, I'm sure all of those who are listening to this right now would agree to that. And it's the way perhaps you explained, as you were navigating through the story. I was hooked. And to me, it also does sound like I agree to what you said towards the end, because. After all, I think, yeah, writing does make a big difference to integrate, those experiences in our subconscious mind, right? So it's I would say, in your own lives, and definitely it does I mean, it does document your uh, documenting as well, but it's not just documenting for the sake of documenting it, right? So, Tim, if I have to, make this a more practical, right? I mean, you have given two real life examples of how the act of writing does change people. Not after the book is published or anything as that, but during the process of writing itself. But for someone listening to this right now who feels the pull to write, but also feels, I mean, he doesn't know or she doesn't know where to start at. So, what's a mentally healthy way that you would approach? I mean, you would tell them to approach, writing without turning it into any kind of, I would say, self-judgment.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. And I think the first thing is to realize it's a better time than ever to be able to publish a book. There's many different paths. You can self-publish, and you can seek a small traditional publisher or a big five if you think you have a shot. But even going the self-publishing route, there's pathways there. Some are very low cost or no cost. Some you spend a bit more money, but you get more help and support. But no matter what your situation, there is a path forward. So that's first thing, is just to know it is totally possible. The second thing is, don't write a book, because that's impossible and you'll never do it, quote unquote. I'm sort of joking here, but what I mean to say is just write one page of a book and then do that again and again and again. And so that gets to trying to craft a writing habit and to get in a routine where you don't need, people often have mindset barriers. So one of those is like, I need weeks and weeks or months with no family, no job, no business. And of course, when I just wrote a book, I have 2 kids, I have a business, I have a family, and yet, but I knew I just had to audit my life and figure out those little pieces of time with consistency. So you don't need a lot of time. You just need a very small amount of time with consistency and consistency. But the third thing I'll just say is that your first draft is going to be horrible. And guess what? The first draft of even the most famous books you've read was probably horrible as well. So you need to accept that. And you don't want to be editing and judging yourself at the beginning. You want to realize, no, everybody's first drafts are horrible, but nobody needs to read your first draft. And some call it a healing draft, if you have to write some stuff that you're not going to share, nobody needs to read that. So don't worry with your first draft. Every first draft is going to be horrible. And besides that, I would say I believe in doing an outline. It depends on the type of book, but I think there's a lot of benefits to doing an outline. And a lot of this I cover in my book, The Call to Authorship: How and Why to Write, Publish, and Promote a Nonfiction Book. And it's broken into 4 parts, which are plan, write, publish, promote. And it's really just that planning stage and the writing stage, where what I've done is sort of boil it down to a 1-page plan. And then really there's a process of doing an outline and then crafting a habit and then enjoying the journey. So then you're doing this. You want to manage your expectations, because a book can be meaningful and it can be valuable, but most books don't sell a lot. So you want to kind of get the facts straight and manage your expectations. So most books don't sell more than 100 or 200 copies, which isn't to say you couldn't use a book as a very valuable business tool. I get into that, but it can still be a worthwhile journey to go down, but you want to go into it realistically. So
Yeah, I think that approach is truly impeccable, Tim. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think I would just like to add, don't use AI to write your book, because I think yeah, I mean, that's not the path that you would want yourself to go down into, because again, I think writing a book is a human experience. I mean, it's created by humans for humans, right? And it does. I mean, writing a book takes a lot of patience, all right? And
yeah,
that's the, I would say, that's the nuance, one of the nuances, right? Patience,
yeah, yeah.
that it boils down to. But again, thank you so much, Tim, for bringing this kind of clarity and honesty into this mix, into this conversation. So, what's for someone listening to this right now and who wants to explore your book and learn more about you, where can they find you at?
Well, the book, you can go on Amazon, The Call to Authorship: How and Why to Write, Publish, and Promote a Nonfiction Book. My author website is calltoauthorship.com. And if you're interested in publishing information, we've got a free guide to publishing there. I'm also developing a course that guides people through creating that 1-page plan. It's called the Call to Authorship Plan, which is just to, people start with all this confusion and anxiety, and the goal is to get them beyond that, to having clarity, knowing what they want, knowing why they're doing it, knowing who they're doing it for, and with a clear sense of the steps to actually get it done. So it comes away, they come away demystified about what publishing and writing a book is.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. I would say that's really helpful for someone who wants to actually put themselves out there, put their books out there, and definitely I'll include the links in the show notes for you all, so you can find that easily. And with that, we come to the minute, to the end of this conversation. And I just want to thank you all for joining with me today on this conversation. And if this conversation did stir something in you, I just want you to take a moment to perhaps, go back to your favorite part of this conversation and take a moment perhaps to listen to that inner nudge that your own uh, heart has been telling you to, because I think sometimes well-being isn't about fixing ourselves all right. I mean, definitely it is one of the I would say the goal, right? But I think it's also about expressing what's already there, right? So I think the book again, Tim's book would immensely help you all to do that. And so definitely do check out his book. And thank you all for listening to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life once again. This has been Sayan, and I'll see you in the next one.